When I was only maybe 10 years old, I'd get up early on Saturday mornings in the winter. I'd go out and start my little old Bravo. I had a long track Bravo. I'd fire it up myself and I would ride up the trails to my grandparents' house, that is the Noseworthys. They'd be just getting ready to have breakfast, so I'd go in probably 7 in the morning, I would guess, and sit down with my Nan and Pop and have breakfast. As soon as we'd finish breakfast, me and Pop would get our gear on, we'd hitch up the sleds, and we would head in the trail with the chainsaw and cut firewood. Now currently in Newfoundland, a lot of homes are switching over to electric heat pumps, and oil heat was always somewhat prominent, but even just back then, 15 years ago or so, wood heat would have been the main source of heat in most homes. And here in my little rural area, it still is. Wood heat, just traditional wood heat, fellows cutting for themselves is very common, although you guys know that I burn oil right now. That is how I heat my home. Now I can tell you that if Pop was around here now and still able to cut wood, he would be cutting wood. Even in his old age, he just, man, there's almost nothing he loved more in the world than being in with the chainsaw. He'd be in anytime he could. Now this right here was my grandfather's last chainsaw. And unfortunately, my grandfather, although at an old age, came down with dementia, and his mind deteriorated fairly quickly over the span of a couple of years. But this is a chainsaw that he bought when his mind was starting to fade. It was his last saw, a smaller saw, and I was very fortunate to have it gifted to me at that time, so it is definitely a treasure for me. I have not done a lot with the saw. It's still basically a new saw. I've used it a few times, a little trimming, a little bit of work, chunking up a few pieces of wood. You guys remember I made the block for the anvil there a couple of years ago with it, but I have not used it a lot. I did use it this fall when I was tearing a big patio off the back of the house here. And I did destroy the chain. The chain's pretty rough. I think it can be brought back. I was going to go ahead and put a whole new chain and cutter bar on it. Even though it may not have needed it, I was going to go ahead and do that until I saw the price. It was going to cost me like $100 to put a new chain and bar on this thing. I don't want to spend that right now until I have to. So we're going to go ahead today, take off the cover bar, clean everything up, service the saw, and just have it put back, sitting ready. I'm hoping to get in to cut a little bit of wood later this winter, this spring, just for the fireplace, a little bit of backup wood supply here. So I'm really hoping to bring you guys along for that. Let's give it one last try here. No, that whole stud is twisting for some reason. I'm hoping an impact will break it. Yeah. That quick hammer just helps break stuff like that. Let's pull this chain and bar off of here. Now my favorite solution, brake cleaner. Just a light little spritz. You should see Dad's face when I start hosing stuff down with expensive brake cleaner like that. He's a little more conservatively minded than me. He always gets a laugh. Sometimes I use a little extra when he's around just to get his reaction. Now, of course, me being a little kid at the time, I didn't spend much time with the saw in my hands when we used to go like that when I was a young boy. I was the picker-upper. So I'd drive my little skidoo in, and Pop Skidoo would have the big set of sleds on it, and he would cut, And as he would drop the trees, of course you drop a tree, limit where it is, and you're usually on snowshoes at the time, a lot of snow around there, and then you junk it right where it is. As he's junking it, trees here aren't like out in Western Canada or down in certain parts of the States where you have, 2-foot diameter junks. Usually your junks are going to be, say, under 10 inches in diameter. So junk them right where it is, and I would have a pull hook, be pulling them away from a saw, throwing them out up to the road, out by the sled, and then I'd be loading the sled as he'd be cutting. So he'd just cut until he figured we had enough for a load. He'd keep an eye on how much I had in the sled, and that's how we go. When we get the sled loaded up, we'd both jump on, we'd head out towards home. That would usually take us to mid-morning, and that's when he'd have second breakfast. He was a man of lunches. He's about my height, a little bit shorter than me, but small little man, fit, always in good shape, and ate so often. Now, small meals, mind you, but ate constantly. He would have his breakfast in the morning, like I said. Come 10 o'clock or so, he would have his 10 o'clock lunch, second breakfast sort of thing. Then he'd be home 12 sharp. Had to have lunch 12 sharp. He'd have his 3 o'clock lunch in the woods. Man, those were some good memories there. And always, he was always extremely ambitious, I'll say, with his loads. He'd always load the sled down, everything he could get in it. Overestimate how well the trails were trying to get up out of there. I think he really wanted to take out as much wood as he can. He's just the way he was. Oftentimes he'd cause more trouble like that because you'd be getting stuck and have to unload the sled and move 4 feet ahead till you were out of the snowdrift or whatever, till you're unstuck, reload the sled. I've heard Dad telling a story of doing that, I think 4 times maybe? I might be wrong, but I believe Dad tells the story 4 times in one trip with a sled load of wood. So you leave your cutting site with a sled load of wood on the snowmobile and you make your way out. So as you're making your way out, you get stuck. If you get stuck, you are not getting unstuck with that sled load of wood. You're just not pulling it out of the hole. So unfortunately, you have to unload all your wood. Then, now that you have a light sled, a light snowmobile, you can manage to get it unstuck, get it back up on a solid road, and reload your sled. I think 4 times, I believe it was one time, they unloaded and reloaded. Just Pop being a little too, I don't know what you'd call it, a little too eager. Okay, we have our parts all cleaned up. Man, the soft jaw vise is just unreal for working on anything really. The fact that you can clamp a whole chainsaw in, and if you were sharpening like we're going to do soon, you know, especially on a bench with this kind of mass that you can hang, you know, a 18 or 20 pound saw off the side of it, and it's just rock solid. It's just awesome. Now, I'm no professional sawyer, I'm not an expert with a chainsaw, but I will explain the mechanics of this to people who really have no experience. So you have a gas engine running in here with a throttle back here. You have a brake assembly right here that stops your chain dead in its tracks. Your engine runs to this sprocket right here, which notice you have fairly wide gears. Those mesh with your teeth. What you have right here is an adjustment which meets in the pegs on this, which is called a cutter bar. Your stud here for holding your bar in place. Here's your adjustment screw, which will draw your chain. So as you can see, it'll sit right down over there like that. Now, with that there, as we adjust, you can see it's moving that bar forward and back, so we can make adjustments to get our chain to the proper tension. So I'm going to put this very poor chain back on here. Very dull, I should say. Not necessarily a bad chain, it's just really dull. Now a chain can't just run in that bar dry, so chainsaws have an oil tank right up here in the front. So this gets filled with chain oil, which is different than most other types of oils. And it just has a small bleed valve, a leaky valve inside the chain case here, inside the cover, and it will just bleed oil out through your chain guard here. It's constantly just flicking around your chain, keeping your chain oiled so it doesn't run hot. If your chain were to really start running hot, either you have it a little too tight on the bar, or your valve is plugged up and you're not bleeding oil onto your chain. Now we're getting to the chain sharpening, and this isn't even just a normal maintenance sharpening. A lot of these teeth are damaged pretty bad. I took a lot of life out of it. Taking that patio off, of course, anytime you're getting into work like that, when you're striking nails and things, which I struck multiple, it really damages the teeth. The teeth aren't super hard on chainsaw chains, and they damage quite easily. Now this is just a standard run-of-the-mill chainsaw chain here. This is as ordinary as you can get for a chainsaw chain. So what you have here is a tooth. So this is a cutting tooth. It has a leading edge right here. And these are called your rakers. And they act as like a depth stop, and also to help clear out your kerf. So this, if your raker is filed too far down below your tooth will get too much bite. It'll dive too fast for your saw. Now if you have a really big running saw that can handle like a lot of pressure on the engine, a lot of strain, then you could have these rakers lower than you would on a smaller saw like this, because it can handle, you know, a real deep gouge for every tooth. This being a small engine saw, you can't have those rakers brought down too far. Those depth stops can't be down too low. The bite will be too big for the chainsaw to chew up. So you have to make sure. Now you can buy tools these days that'll file that in unison. So you run the Stihl tool through your tooth, it'll sharpen and file your rakers at the same time. I don't do that. It'll be in a two-step process. So I'll start at this tooth here and start working my way around, just to make sure I don't start resharpening the same teeth. Just put a mark right here so I'll know when I get back around to that spot again, that tooth. Now I'll also point out that the teeth are staggered. Notice how they're on either side of the chain. They switch, the angle switches back and forth, inside, outside angle, inside, outside. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of things that come into play with chainsaw sharpening. This is why you see all these companies developing these different tools and gimmicks and a lot of different things. It's to help you manage what's going on here. You have these staggered teeth that are offset all the way up. If you overfile one side, your chain will try to pull to one side or the other in the kerf. If your chain is a little too tight, your chain will run hot. You can spoil your chain. You can create problems like that. If it's too loose, also problems, as you can imagine. If you overfile your rakers, you're going to get too much bite for your saw, and your saw is just going to bog all the time. You're not going to get any performance out of it. If you underfile your rakers, your saw is going to be winding out all the time because you're not going to get enough bite. The saw is just going to be running at max RPM because you're only allowing your teeth to just take just the smallest little nibble. So everything has to be done just nicely here. Want everything nice and even, and we'll take our time and do a good job. So you'll want to meet the factory saw angle. This is where these little guided tools and stuff come in. They take the guesswork out of it. It's just like freehand sharpening. All these concepts play in together. If you can freehand sharpen, chances are you can do a half decent job of sharpening a chainsaw tooth. Now that doesn't, of course, that doesn't cover all the different issues like evenness and things from tooth to tooth and side to side, and your rakers filing and things like that. Those things won't carry over. But just the mechanics and the practice, the understanding of sharpening a chainsaw tooth, it's all roughly the same. It's the same concept. You want to stay with the factory angle. You want to hold your file so that it meets factory angle. Unless, of course, for some strange reason you're trying to alter that, but keep the pressure in the right area so you remove steel where you want to remove the steel. Beautiful. Utilize your brake for this process. I was thinking of a little story here. When I was a little kid, I was playing out in my yard here, and because I brought my child at home, for those of you who don't know, and there's a step down from my lawn to the neighbor's driveway that's several feet down. Well, I was out running around the garden, and we had a little short fence, 12-inch fence. I was running around the garden, and I tripped over this fence and fell headlong down off the grass there, down to the neighbor's driveway. And I fell right where he happened to just have his freshly sharpened chainsaw out, laid on the ground with the gas can, I guess getting ready to go cutting or something. And I caught myself on the barrel of that saw, as luck should have it. I did right here. I cut my pinky, manged my pinky up a little bit, but I got out of that one pretty easy. But just kind of one of those fluke accidents. Now notice how the teeth are angled back. So the more your tooth gets sharpened backwards, the lower it gets. So that's why each time you sharpen, you should lower your rakers a little bit more. Now you can use a flat bastard file for this, or you can use, not this one, this one's wore out. So I guess there are a couple lessons to this story. That is, first off, take good care of your tools. Service them, clean them up. I know some guys just abuse them and leave them in the biggest kind of mess, and if they're around cement, they're coated in cement and they never rinse them off. And I just don't like that. I think if we're fortunate enough, we're privileged enough to be able to have these nice tools and the nice selection of Dewalt on the wall there, I'm not going to abuse them. I'm not going to take for granted that that is a privilege and that I am very grateful to own those tools. So I'm going to clean them up once in a while, and I'm not going to abuse them. I'm going to take good care of them, store them up on the wall sensibly, and not beat them up, not let them get trampled underfoot. Take care of your stuff. I'd say secondly, and most importantly, definitely in this video, is cherish your time with loved ones. And I'm preaching to the choir here because I don't always have the easiest time to doing that. I'm certainly not a social butterfly, even when it comes to my own family. I have difficulty interacting and a little bit of a hermit. I like to stay home. I like to keep to myself. But you've got to spend that time and cherish the time with family. Even when it comes to in-laws, which sometimes it just drives me. But in all seriousness, take a little extra time. Maybe this week, call that friend you haven't been talking to in a while, or that family member. I know I sure wish I could take the saw here and go in the woods with Pop now. What I'd give to be able to do that. But thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate your support. If you could hit that subscribe button, if you're not already subscribed, I would really appreciate it. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if there's something you would like to see coming up, and I'll do my best to accommodate you. Hit that like button, it helps. Share, that's about the best way you could help this channel, but I know that's a little difficult. Once again, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next video.
Right on, perfect. Play it again. Huh? Play it again, come on.
No, I can't play.
Oh, son. I guarantee you.
Don't go over the bridge.
got that in.
Hey?
You never got that in place.
That's trying to keep